Hello everyone and welcome to my King's Gambit course. In this chapter we're going to study the modern line which is used nowadays by many strong players, and this is one of the modern ways to fight against the King's Gambit. It's the third move, Knight F6. So we start with King's Gambit Accepted, F4, he takes F4, and after Knight F3 it's, well, by the way, D5 will be a transposition to the Fight Bear's Gambit, yeah, but the move is Knight F6. The idea is very simple. We develop a piece. We don't want to mess up with all sorts of this G5 movements, yeah, but instead we just attack the pawn, and we also ready to play D5 in a better moment, yeah, maybe just to capture on D5 with a knight. So white probably has to play E5 here. And here, black has, let's say, three options. So, well, technically you can even play knight g8 or knight g4, but there are three more or less logical moves. So let's start with the move knight d5. I think it's not great at all. It simply pours water into our meal, so it helps us with development. So the right move here is knight c3. And in case black takes here, dc3, for example, d5, bishop f4, bishop e7, we just play queen g2, and we finish development. We move our h-pawn forward, I don't know, maybe c4 sometimes would work, maybe bishop d3, and in general, yeah, white enjoys a very nice and simple play here. So knight d5, knight c3, c6 is another try to excuse this move, but I think it's also not so great for black. So for example, takes, d4 is, white is obviously doing fine. So for example, if d6, just we take the pawn, and the same ideas, just queen d2, or maybe bishop d3 and castle kingside. That depends, on your own taste. And there is a move g5 here, which looks ugly, but yeah, we get to know what to do. Of course, we play h4 first of all, g4, and here, if you want to make it calm, you can play knight g1. But here f3 is a little bit unclear, yeah, so maybe this is not as bad as it could be. For example, d6. I would suggest you to play e6 here, f takes g4, and an important idea that after bishop e7, g5, h6, we always play knight f3, and we can defend it. And but just in case, if black is tricky and black plays, for example, here after knight g6, sorry, knight c6, c3. No. For example, in this moment, if black plays h6, basically anytime. The idea, so we cannot play g5 so far. I mean, it's not so smart. We can also play g5, by the way, but there is another nice move, knight h3. So you bishop e7, then g5, for example, and here c3, and then we probably want to develop pieces. For example, queen d7, we can also take the pawn, and after castle, okay, bishop h4, we play knight f2. All this is fine. So once again, we have this superior sound structure in the center, and this is quite easy for us to play. And in case of the castle, we play bishop e3 and king d2, and I guess white is just better here. So we are not quite in time to make castle, but that's not a big problem when the center is so solid and our position is safe. So basically it was about the move knight g1. You can also study the lines, but I think that more in the spirit of King's Gambit is to play knight g5 here. It's a better move in my opinion. So h6 obviously, and we just take on f7. King f7, queen g4. So we have couple of pawns for a piece first of all, but also our development is just great. So d6 we give a check. Bishop takes f4 when they finish the development, and I think we are going to get very nice initiative. I mean, regardless what black does here, it's all about us. If we play well, I think we should convert this to a full point. So this is about the move knight d5, which is obviously quite unfortunate. Another move is knight e4. This is a reasonable move if you don't know a lot of theory. You wanna play solidly. Here I think we play d3. It's a typical idea with knight on e4. You play first d3, So after knight c5, you play d4 and you win another tempo. So knight g5 is the only move here. Bishop f4, knight e6, and probably I would prefer to keep this bishop alive. Bishop e3. So, for example, our idea is just to play d4 here. So whatever black does, for example, if black plays d6, we can play d4, and this helps us to develop pieces normally. Yes, so our just idea to play d4. But you know, black can try c5 is an interesting move, probably a novelty or something. And now d4 is not that great because black takes and gives queen a5 check and wins a pawn on e5. And after this, black also provokes us to trade queens, and maybe this is also playable for white. But this is, you know, some kind of simplification. So that's why I think after c5, we should try something like knight c3 and just g3, so we can find another way to develop our bishop. And this would be, this actually looks more like King's Indian defense with colors reversed into some very good edition. Yes, so d5, for example, we take, black takes, and after castle, well, this is a very normal position, so our plan is obvious, like queen d2, rook a1, I don't know, maybe knight h4, knight f5, maybe knight e4. So yeah, it's very solid for black as well, but I think for those of you who used maybe to play King's Indian as black, you know that this structure, okay, once you reach this, obviously opening went pretty well as far as all your pieces are active and opponent has no center. But you can't take this from black, that black's position is also very solid. These knights on c6 and d6, they control d4 square, and yep, you know, the whole game lies, of course, ahead. So these are small moves after e5, but of course the main idea is to play knight h5 here. And knight h5, for example, it was played in a recent game, I think last year, between Magnus Carlsen and Ding Liren. And Magnus played queen e2 here, and after bishop e7, for example, d4, castles knight c3, d6. You see, it's a very simple plan for black to develop pieces. And after bishop d2, bishop g4, castles knight d7, it was a big fight, and in the end, Ding won the game. But in general, it's obvious that black is doing all right here. Yes, so the pawn, you know, the pawn is alive on f4, and you know, white's pieces are a little bit restricted, and black already developed all his pieces, and now the next move is like c6, b5, queen e5 or something. But of course, the game was unclear because, you know, once again, if you see the evaluation, like even if, you know, opponent is better or something, this never means an end of the game, yeah, because first of all, engine never fully understands, you know, all the finesses, and it sees like the current situation, but in general, a lot of things may change if you start play actively, and okay, sometimes you just bluff your opponent, but sometimes objectively, yeah, your initiative grows stronger, and it's more than enough to compensate a missing pawn or two or three, but doesn't matter. So let's get back. d4 is the move I recommend you to play here. d4 is a nice developing move. So we grab the center, we support our pawn, and black has four options here, four main options. Of course, you can investigate in some moves like knight c6 or c6 or whatever. Less logical moves, to say so. But the main, I would say, would be bishop e7, for example. It's a logical move, but it's important to play bishop e2 here. So now I guess d6 is the logical one. I mean, I really wonder what will be in case of bishop h4 check. But in the worst case, we can simply go for king f1. But we also can consider, you know, taking here. But I guess king f1 is always a nice reaction. So after d6, if you castle, for example, bishop g4, because our idea is also to play knight e1 and attack this knight twice. You see. So after bishop g4, knight c3, for example, castles knight e1. We slowly win the pawn back, takes, g6, bishop f4. And here f6 square is also weak, and our knight will go to d5 or to e4. So for example, knight c6, rook d1. This is just a very pleasant page for white. So after d5, yeah, after d4, yeah, there are 3 more moves. So d6, d5, and g6. I think let's start with d5. It's a very, very principled move. It's it's a lot of things to study here and a lot of very picturesque lines. I really had a I really enjoyed analyzing this line because it's stylish, it's tasty, it's unusual, it's interesting, and I hope when you check the lines, you would also be consumed by the brilliancy. So c4 here basically has a lot of options. I mean, okay, once again, c4 is important because while the knight is on h5, it's distracted from the center. We should strike swiftly. Okay, so like 5 moves are covered here. So let's start with knight c6. This is quite an unfortunate move, and Sosikaran played like this, and also Mikhailevsky. So this looks logical, but after this move, black is nearly losing. cd, queen takes, just knight c3. And after bishop b4, we don't need to be brilliant. Of course, we can go for some fancy stuff like king f2, but just bishop e2 is a nice one. The next move is a castle, and black's pieces, are awful. So most likely black will have to take on c3, and then we will have a brilliant center. We will attack h5 knight. So black is simply not in time to, to defend everything. And I think white is once again nearly winning here. So knight c6 is a bad move. Another logical maybe, is bishop g4. Here we also take on d5, also knight c3, and basically we do the same. This is slightly better addition of the previous line for black, but in general this is also, this position favors white a lot. So this is bishop g4. What else? For example, bishop e6. Bishop e6 is a nice move covering the center. So we can obviously play cd and knight c3. This deserves attention, and maybe this is objectively even stronger. I mean, if you dig very deep into the analysis. But I guess knight c3 is a way more principled decision. So for example, here after knight c3, okay, like sooner or later has to take on c4. So c6 is another line, but it will be not so principled. After c6, we just continue our development. And after this move, we go for d5. Let's say bishop g4, bishop takes c4. For example, bishop e7, so black wants to finish the development. And here we can surely castle, but we can already ask black to show some precision. Queen a4 check. So now we surely interrupt the development. So they cannot defend with the knight because of e6 already. So we have to play queen d7, but then queen b3 is strong, and b7 is hanging, so we win another nice tempo. And in case of c6, we suddenly go bishop e2, defending from b5, and also preparing to recapture on a free little bishop. And black really has to be precise here and play a lot of strong moves not to get into trouble quickly. So for example, b5 is nearly the only move here if black wants to hold the equality. Queen e4, then b4. And well, here the stylish line begins. It's not necessary to follow it strictly, but we can enjoy it, of course. Knight b5, f5. Somehow this is only move for black, otherwise black is much worse. Queen d4, so now our queen is distracted. So c takes b5, bishop takes b5, king f7, d6, and it looks interesting. Yeah, bishop h4 check, and here basically we have 2 moves, but knight takes h4, probably this domination is enough only for a draw for white, like rook e1, and we have to do something like bishop a4 and bishop b3 to repeat moves. Maybe after king f1, bishop f3, gf, g6, bishop takes f4 is somewhat better for white, but the position, I would say, remains unclear. Yeah, so queen f4, king g7, and once black completed all this, managed to find all this good sequence of moves, well, then the position is about equal, but of course it looks very, very fun for white, like pawns are advanced so far, and black's knight is so passive, so I guess it's a very decent position for white. So this was about the move bishop e6. The move c6, I don't think it should have an independent meaning. Our general idea is to play knight c3 and then develop pieces, yeah. So bishop e2 is also a good move, but here, for example, knight c3, so if bishop e6, we just keep on developing. Yeah, and we probably shouldn't be in a big hurry to take on d5. That's also an option, but we can also leave without this move. But for example, if g5 here, with the idea to combine some of the ideas together, there is a nice reputation knight g1, and if knight g7, then I mean simply we can crush pawn structure with h4. But if g4, then there is a nice move knight h3, and suddenly black is not going to hold this pawn on f4, and our pieces become active. And since we already have some advantage in the center, this is a really big achievement, so we are going to win the pawn back. So these are the small sidelines inside this c4 move, and of course the main move here is g5. g5 is the main idea. Okay, of course computer shows it, but it's objectively the best move, and other moves are not anywhere close to g5. g4. So, like, take a look at this move. I mean, seriously, this is a little bit shocking when I see it for the first time, but it's objectively the strongest idea to block, for at this moment, to block g-pawn. And this is some different way, yeah, to fight for the h4 square, so queen on d8 never gets active. So here, for example, it turns out that it's not so good to take this pawn. So, for example, fg, then just knight takes g5, and black is losing. Bishop takes g4 is a possible move, but after rook g1, also black has to retreat. Bishop f5, we just take on g5. Bishop g6, because it was a fork, takes. Now, whenever black takes on d5, there is also knight c3, and we develop our pieces with another tempo. Bishop e7, rook g2, for example, yeah, and more or less the same story. So rook on g2 sometimes covers the second rank and can go to f2 to protect our king from check. And well, here we enjoy very nice development. The position is not so clear, I mean, but white is surely better, but it's very fighting anyway. So it was bishop takes g4, but now there is a funny move, d takes c4, and it turns out that capturing on h5 is not so good because of g4. So that's why we just develop our bishop. So bishop c4 is very natural, and this is another interesting position. So now basically black has to do something about this pawn. So bishop takes g4 is still rook g1. Probably bishop f3, queen g4, bishop f7, king f7, queen h5 is closer to a repetition. So if black is precise here, like they play king e6, queen g4, and also king f7 back. And looks like we have nothing better than to repeat moves, but anyway, it looks scary for black, and I don't think anyway we'll happily play like this. Sorry, anyone will play like this. So instead of bishop f3 and queen d4, there is queen d7 move, optically more calm. But here we just take on g4, we eliminate this big bad bishop, and we play queen b3. And black should be very resourceful here, so like knight c6, bishop f7, king e7 I think is the only move. Now we're just preparing to castle queenside, rook d8, knight e3, and I mean, it's much easier to play as white, but okay, if black is brilliant in finding this knight g7 move, and with idea knight e6, we probably have to go bishop c4, and for example, if knight takes d4, then bishop b4 check, king d7 then castles, bishop b4, knight takes d4, and here, wow, a5. And somehow it's still not so bad for black. I mean, this is amazing, but this is, despite the king is on d7, black is not going to lose this. Yeah, it's about equality, but the position is very, very complex, and anyone can blunder, and probably a mistake will, first mistake may become the last mistake in this position. So h3 is a nice way to bother to disrupt the queen, because queen on g4 protects a lot of important squares. Queen g2, bishop d5, and now probably queen g3 or queen f2. and we just play bishop f3. And this is very much unclear. So queen looks towards f7 square, bishop can attack on the long diagonal, knight on a3 will join the battle shortly. So I believe white is doing very well here, but once again, if your opponent defends like a computer, then okay, not much we can do. We should probably take a draw in that case. So it was about rook g1, queen d7 line. Yeah, this all begins with the move bishop takes g4 here. Another move is knight g7, which is also logical. So knight c3. Okay, for example, if black plays h5 here, trying to push g pawn forward at all costs. So for example, gh5, g4 looks to be okay for black, but here we surely, yeah, we meet this move with h4 in a stylish way. So let's say if g4, knight g5, queen g5, this is just big nothing for black, because after bishop f1, knight h5, it looks like it could be dangerous, but there is a strong reply. Bishop takes f4. We are ready to give away a bishop to finish development, and here we are much better as white. And the next move is castle probably, and black's king is stuck in the center, and all the pieces are going to hang shortly. So after h5, h4, bishop takes g4 is a better try. A-G, knight c6, bishop f4, queen g7. I mean, okay, this is actually a way for black to develop pieces. And for example, d5 here, queen f5, d takes c6, b takes c6, and this is suddenly pretty much in clear position. So queen d4, we choose which piece to protect. Probably the bishop is more valuable for us. Bishop f3. So, for example, e6, like just another breakthrough. You see this position is very attacking, and black has to be precise. We takes, and rook f1. And this is, of course, a big mess. Well, once again, computer shows black is okay to hold a draw, but, without the computer assistance, it's hard to believe black can be doing fine here. They have almost no development, but yes, once again, if your opponent is brilliant enough, then you should only applause, like Spassky applause to Fischer. So after h4, it was the move. Bishop takes g4, and I think we are done with this h5 move. So after h5, we meet this with h4, and the game is on. Another move here is obviously bishop takes g4. This also transposes to some another line from some another move order. And here we should be precise, I believe. h3 is a nice one. So if bishop f3, queen f3, and knight c6. So here, once again, queen g4 also works. Because after queen d7, queen c4, queen e8, black suddenly gives away all of his pieces, but this ends in a draw. So takes, and bishop takes c3. And this is probably going to end with a perpetual check. We can hardly escape without pawns on the second rank. But in case of queen f3, knight c6, we play bishop b5, so we pin this knight. And after bishop b4, g5, also a very complex line, and if black is precise, and if we are precise, then it ends up in an equal position. Takes here, rook b8, and okay, for example, bishop d2, so we should develop pieces anyway. Bishop c3, removing a dangerous knight, takes, and the castle. Also, I mean, this bishop c3 move prevents us from castling queenside. So bishop c3 castles, and here we got get rid on these pawns on f4 and g5. So we go for h4, and after queen d7 we take, and well, once again some computer lines show some almost a complete equality. Maybe it's slightly easier to play as black because, our king is a little bit stuck on e1, but this is not so obvious to me either. So, for example, rook f8, queen f4, queen d3, rook f1, queen g6. And, okay, this is another another kind of, another equal position, and maybe we can also try e6 sooner or later. But I guess queen g4 is just a normal move. We had here rook f6. So most likely black will trade queens, and it will be about equality anyway. So this is like a big shootout, and no idea, no idea what's going on basically. But yeah, some forced line just as an example of what could possibly happen. So this was h3, bishop takes f3 move. There is bishop h5, keeping a pin and insisting for insisting a little bit, and black just waits and wants to know what's going to happen. We get to play h4 now. So the idea is that now after h takes g5, our rook will immediately connect and attack black's bishop, and our knight on f3 is probably hard and sort of our position, so we should protect it. So if now black plays g4, which is logical, of course, there is some fun line. We go knight g5, bishop e7, and we go knight takes f4. A lot of different geometry here to learn. G takes f3, knight takes h5. Black probably has to take here, and win a tempo, king f1, knight h5, and looks like our best try is bishop takes f7. This is, this works in many cases in this opening. King f7, queen f3, king e7, queen h5. So this is going to end in a draw as usual. For example, rook f8 check, king e2, queen d4. Okay, we simply take here, and the endgame is obviously equal. We are going to, win the pawn back, and in a very worst case, we are going to defend with 3-on-2 endgame. But this is unlikely will happen. Yeah, probably it will be like 2-on-2 or something. So this is equal as well. After perhaps this is the line. Yeah. So after queen takes d4. Here, instead of the check on f8, queen takes d4 is another option, but black wants to get a better edition of this endgame, but now there is no endgame. We go bishop g5 check, and black has probably to play king e8, and after queen h5, there is nothing better than to repeat moves like king e7 and so on. So this also leads to a draw, but after a rather complex fight. So for example, here after knight d5, bishop e7 is probably the only move, for example, yeah, like knight d7, knight g5 or something, and black is going to lose this. So once again, black should be super precise as well. Maybe it was the move g4. Yeah. So the next stop is move knight c6. Knight d5. Well, it's important to set our knight onto d5 because knight on c6 no longer controls f6 square, as you can see. So, for example, if we would play knight d5 here, black would have knight d7 move. Knight c6, knight d5, bishop e7 takes. And okay, our idea is very simple. Just take on h5, and then knight on f3 becomes rock solid. So black has to keep the pin alive. Bishop g4, and here we probably finish our development. Bishop f4, queen d7, knight e3. So sooner or later we go to eliminate this bishop. Castles, for example, knight takes g4, queen takes g4, and rook h4. So now if black retreats with the queen d7 and d5, this is absolute mess. This is just unclear. Here rook h2, bishop before king f1, knight e7, d6, and probably black has to play knight g6, but then queen c1. Obviously the position is very chaotic, and well, again, as usual, yeah, the official evaluation is equality, but anything can happen. And after rook h4, queen g2, maybe a more logical move. We can just go for queen e2, and here, like queen takes, king takes, knight f5, rook g4. Knight takes d4, knight takes d4, knight takes d4, and king, for example, f2. And this endgame is about equal, so we have two bishops, and these f7 and h7 pawns are easy for us. So, of course, this line is just an example, but as an example, For example, in this position, black can play b5, but you know, in a game between Stockfish and Lila, black played rook h to g8. And this also was a draw in a very similar way. So basically, white's activity fully compensates the pawn. b5 is more or less the same story. Also should be a draw. So I think now we are done with this move knight g7, knight c3, and dc4. And this is probably, probably the main line we should know. It can also appear from different move order, I believe. So for example, here dc4, bishop c4, bishop g4 is the same story, yeah? But here, after knight g7, knight c3, for example, if black goes for some solid move like c6, we go for h4 as well. Bishop takes g4, bishop e2, and well, this position is also very much unclear. I mean, obviously our king is exposed. Black king is also not safe. So, for example, bishop b4. We got to develop our pieces. Knight f5, knight takes g5, bishop takes, queen takes. And here, for example, if black wants to eliminate our rook, then after knight g3, queen g4, knight h1, it's probably losing because of knight f7, king h7, e6. King has to go forward, perhaps, and after bishop f4, it's a winning attack for white. I mean, we just will finally get rid of this annoying king on f6, bishop g5, bishop e5, like different ideas, also castle and so on. So, for example, this doesn't work too well for black. So after bishop g4, bishop e2, bishop b4 is a dangerous way to play like this, yeah. dc4 is another move, because now it's not very logical to take on c4 because we just played bishop e2. But now knight e4 and we are going to f6, knight d7, knight f to g5. Black probably wants to keep the bishop alive, not to help us develop our queen, and also to protect on c4 and f7. And we're not necessarily in a hurry to take the bishop. We first take on f4, queen b6. And, sometimes maybe we are not in time to castle queenside, but here we can castle kingside, because why not? All our pieces are near. Castles, and king h2. So one safe move, and here after knight f5, as usual, it's a big mess. So for example, bishop g4 or bishop h5. And, I mean, this is completely unclear. Both sides have really plenty of options, so I believe it's up, to the game to decide who plays better. But in general, this looks fun, yeah. And also, black king is only optically safe. After we kick away the bishop on e6 and play e6, it's always, faces some kind of mating nets and so on. So this is more or less it about the move d5. So after d5, we play c4, and after g5, we meet this move with g4, and here the fun begins, like completely mind-boggling complications. So instead of d5, there is the move g6. G6 is an interesting try, so we defend our knight in advance, and also we can consider developing bishop on g7 sometimes. Maybe knight g7 is also a good idea, so just a useful move. And now we wait, until white to reveal his plan. So for example, if bishop c4, black will play d5, if bishop e2, black will play d6, so just a useful move g6. I think here we should play queen e2 to prevent black from having this move, d5 or d6, because now it's pawn will be captured with the check. So, for example, if bishop b4 check here, maybe an interesting move, because anyway, white generally wants to develop his knight on c3. Anyway, we play knight c3. For example, if knight c6, we use another useful idea. It's a very common idea. Probably you have seen, you might have seen this idea in other chapters. g4, that's how we open up the queen side, the king side. Also, we make a path for our bishop. So, for example, bishop h6, preventing black from castling, knight e7, castles, and now, for example, bishop c3, probably with the idea to play something like knight d5 and knight f4 and try to jump around with the knights. But actually d5 is a nice move, completely in the spirit of the Gambit. So it turns out that Black has no time. He should be, be hasty with the counterplay. Then okay, already b takes c3. So now if knight takes d5, the d file is also open, and all the dark squares are awful. So the structure a little bit reminds of Anderson Kizeritsky game. Queen e5, d6, knight e5, queen d2. So after a bunch of computer moves, Black is going to hold this. Yeah, also g2 is very necessary move, so we prevent h file from, we prevent white's rook from pressing onto the h file and also distracting white's bishop a little. And here after trades b6, the idea that after queen g5, Black can probably take a risk and castle kingside as well. And the next move is bishop h6. And computer shows equality, but as for me, I have just zero faith in Black's position, and I guess some further investigation would show that Black's task is really difficult, really difficult here. So this is bishop b4 move, but bishop b4 is a little bit too much, I believe. Bishop e7 is logical move, but here we also go for g4. This is our normal idea. F takes g3, en passant is probably the only nice move to play as Black. Now just knight c3. So 2 pawns is a lot, but I think we have full compensation. So for example, gh2, we just go bishop h6, so we don't care about our rook on g1. For example, knight g3, we just take it back, and this is surely winning for white. Like, just look at this development. I mean, we just keep the center open, and also we have like this bishop g7 idea in mind, and in a few moves I think Black will simply resign. So after bishop h6, d5 is somewhat which should be played, not to resign immediately. So ed, for example, queen d6, knight e4, queen a6, maybe winning some time and offering a trade. Queen h2, queen e5 check. Now we probably want to play knight c3, knight c6, and d5. And okay, the line goes on with some computer brilliancies like queen g2, bishop a3, castles, queen takes c3, b takes a3. Well, bishop f5 is the move Black can play here, and after rook h5, the game is only at its beginning. So maybe there is some, some perpetual check as it usually happens in such positions. But I believe white, once again, when you play King's Gambit, you should be ready for all kind of chaotic positions, and this one is a good example. So this was about possible move g takes h2, but I think no one will play like this. G takes h2 is a little bit too risky. So instead, I think g5 is a normal move which people would opt for. We go bishop h6 as again, yeah. So we don't want Black to castle, and we have to develop bishop anyway. Bishop g4, castles, knight d7, some normal development. Black is trying not to collect some extra tempi like d4, d5, and so on. Here we probably have to play h3. So Black has some trick here: knight f4, queen e3, g2, bishop f4, and g takes h1. And this looks ugly, but after bishop d6, Black suddenly has castle. And this probably saves the day for Black. A g4, bishop d6, bishop b5, rook a8. The position is very fun to analyze, but yeah, as usual, as you might understand, it ends with an equal evaluation. So knight e5, nice intermezzo. Queen h2, bishop d7, bishop e5, bishop f4 is the idea. We play knight d5, c6, we take here, and probably, okay, I don't know, after cd, this might end in a drawish rook endgame, but okay, that's basically what happens every time if you dig deep enough during your analysis. So knight f4 is a fun move, but we have this queen e3 trick. But after bishop f3, for example, takes, castles, bishop g2, Black has to play c6, and here the position is really unclear. So for example, rook h1, And we have two bishops, and despite being 2 pawns down, we have a very nice plan. Yeah, playing in the center. So I would say black has to centralize like rook e8. But there is an example. If, for example, black plays bishop f6, protects on f7, then we just go like all out d5. So there is queen c7 move. Don't ask me why. And here there is a smart idea to play h4 to have this bishop h3 idea in mind here, just to pin the knight and to affect the king a little. So bishop c3, queen c3, and for example c5, we're trying to close the center. So here bishop g5 is the move. Somehow black black is slightly discoordinated, and they have to play f6 because, for example, if rook goes to e8, this rook is hanging on h8, and I believe we have something like bishop e7 here. At least maybe some other options. So after f6, we go rook e6, queen b8, and looks like, okay, black is defending, black is 2 pawns up, and our bishop is hanging. And the next move is basically knight f4, but we just go, we play for the beauty here, just d6, takes, and here an important move, rook e5, provoking black for b6 move to weaken the long diagonal even more, and after b6, rook e7. And once again, computer shows equality here, but I believe black doesn't really want to play such a position. Unlike us, of course, we are happy because, okay, we are going to play queen f3, queen c6 mate, maybe queen d3, queen a6. So if someone will defend this as black, this would be just the most incredible person I have ever seen, yeah, because this looks just devastatingly bad for black. But maybe there are some tricks to put up a fight. So this was the move, for example, bishop f6, the greedy move. Okay, let's say instead some move like rook h2 e8. So now d5 maybe is less fortunate because some exchange operations, and now black also has like knight e5 at its command. But now, okay, we have probably to collect some material. Queen f7, queen f6, queen takes h7. So we win the 2 pawns, and we shouldn't be worried too much about our queen because we are in time with some counterplay. e7 bishop is hanging, knight e4 is coming. So one of the ways for black to play here is g5. It's probably the best bet. Knight e4, queen h8, transposing to an endgame. But this is probably also drawish. Technically, we even have an extra pawn. But here, after knight f4, we should watch out because g3 pawn is very dangerous and knight is jumping. So a little bit of precision is required here. Bishop f3. And after rook g8, our knight begins a journey. Like, first of all, rook e4, yeah, like knight on f4 is placed perfectly, so we kick it away. Knight d5, then attack the rook, attack the king, and knight f5. And the next move will be like rook g4 or rook h4, so maybe also c4 deserves attention, or rook g1. And in general, yeah, pawn is not going anywhere, and it's with some precise play, black can create few problems, but really very few. So, for example, knight f6, rook h4, takes, knight f4. Here we just bring our king closer. For example, knight h3, rook h1. Rook f1. So the blockade is good enough, I believe. Our king is close enough, and this is just an equal position. Probably g3 pawn is not going anywhere. But if black plays carelessly, we just going to bring our king even closer and maybe even win this pawn. But once again, this is just another long line which consists of very, very strong in generals, from the black side especially. And okay, also I should play all right, but anyway, it's very fighting, yeah, and that's exactly what you expect when you play the King's Gambit. I think this is more or less it about the move g6. Yeah, so here we go queen e2, and after bishop e7, g4. That's my direction, and after this we just develop pieces and see what happens. And probably the main move here, I would say, as black is d6. It's more cunning, than d5, because d5 invites us to play c4. And after d6, we probably have to play queen e2 if you want to fight for something, yeah. So basically, it would sometimes even transpose to some similar lines, but I believe here black really wants to black really wants to play d takes e5. So for example, if d5 here, then we just develop pieces. So anyway, we won a tempi with queen e2, so we are just very fast, and we are in time to make a castle here, and queen f2. So then we just put up some pressure onto f4 square, or maybe undermine it with g3, or maybe knight e2, knight f4. So many different ideas as a follow-up. And d takes e5 is the main move, of course. But I believe here the funny line begins. So we have to take with the knight. We want something, and the only move here is queen h4 check. Otherwise, black would be in trouble. Queen h4. Basically, we can try king d1, but I think this is a little bit too much. So that's why we go for g3, takes, and queen takes h1. So this is the position where it all begins. Okay, more or less. Sadly, this knight g6 trick is not good enough. Okay, our knight will be stuck on h8, and black will enjoy some nice development. So we simply continue to develop our pieces. So for example, bishop takes f4. Black has a couple of options. So bishop d6 and bishop e7. It's somehow more precise, for example, to play bishop before check first, to provoke c3, and then play bishop e7. But now we go knight d2, and for example, in case of g5, we simply want to castle, yeah. So g5 is the move to distract us from our plan. Now we probably forced to go for knight takes f7, a very nice move. King f7, bishop e5, attacking the rook. Rook retreats, and we just castle. And I think white has more than enough compensation for a rook. And once again, it's equality according to computer, but I guess the price for this rook will be too high for black. At least for me, it feels like this. Yeah, at least all our pieces are active and we are ready to attack. And another move is bishop d6 instead of bishop e7. But this move is a little bit different. It's a little bit difficult to play like this because you still don't even try to protect. You're not even trying to protect yourself from knight g6 check. But once again, knight g6 check, due to some reasons, it doesn't work. Probably just bishop e6 or something, yeah. But unfortunately, we have to play differently. Knight c3, castles and castles. So we enjoy some brilliant development. And if black is precise here, then black even can try to play for a very tiny advantage in the endgame. But black has to see the idea of bishop h3. That's how black prevents us from playing bishop g2 and rook h1. Yeah, that's the main trick. So for example, bishop e5 is another angle, but the same picture roughly. Bishop h3, we have to play knight e4 here, and again, some moves like bishop f1, these just most likely loses for black. But instead, black goes knight c6, and now we have to play knight f6 check and queen h5. Idea is bishop d3 and simply deliver a mate. So the only move is bishop g2, and here after bishop g4 check and queen g4 check and queen f5, it's always a perpetual check for us, and black has nothing to do about it. But sometimes the perpetual check is the logical outcome, and that's the case. So somehow it's more precise for black to play bishop h3 immediately. But now we have another tactical option, knight takes f7. But this is unfortunately only good for a draw. So bishop f4, gf4, and here, for example, if bishop f1, rook f1, queen h4, we just go knight g5 and then queen e6 check, and this is, I believe, should be equal. Yeah, obviously h pawn is not going to promote anytime soon. And d4 is hanging, c7 is hanging, and probably it will end in a draw. But for example, if black is careless and plays after queen, for example, queen c6, which I don't know, one of the logical options to cover e6 and c4 at the same time. Somehow black has to find like a good sequence, a good portion of only moves not to lose immediately. So 95, 94. Our initiative is just very, very huge. Knight g5. So queen d5 is the only move, just that's it. Queen d3, the only move. c4, queen g2, the only move. Knight g7, probably black is forced more or less to play g6. But now we just trade here, play knight e6, then play f5, and I think there is very nice initiative for white here. Despite objectively black can still hold it, but white is surely playing this for a win. So this is about bishop f1, which is a little bit hasty, but once again, it's difficult. It's also difficult for black, to keep this pressure on and to find the best move. And the best move here is knight d7. And here we probably have to accept the endgame, queen c4. Our idea to deliver a moderate mate with knight h6, queen g8. But after rook f7, we have to take. Black takes the check. So, for example, bishop e6, we trade everything, and after knight f6, king g2, h5, king e3. This is maybe very symbolically better for black, but in fact, of course, this is also an equal position because we have nice pawn center like d4, and the knight will also change its place from c3 maybe to e3, and indeed, white cannot be anything seriously worse here. So this was more or less it about the line, knight f6, e5, knight h5. I believe, knight h5, we meet with this move with d4, and then in case of d6, queen e2. I hope this was instructive and interesting. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next chapter.